All right, so let's get into it. This story, it's practically burned into all of our memories, right?
Yeah.
The O.J. Simpson trial. I
Yeah.
mean, everyone thinks they know it, right?
Oh, yeah.
The white Bronco chased the glove, the verdict, that just seemed to divide the entire nation. But what if I told you there's a whole other side to this?
Right.
A side with witnesses who never got to speak in court.
That's where this deep dive gets really interesting. We're going to explore these what-if scenarios, these alternate perspectives that could have totally changed how the trial went. We're going to be looking at a couple of Netflix docuseries, American Manhunt, the O.J. Simpson story, and The Flip-Off, which has some pretty shocking commentary from O.J.'s former agent, Mike Gill.
Oh, okay, so for those who may need a quick refresher, I mean, honestly, this case is so layered, I don't blame you at all.
Yeah.
We're talking about the murders
Yeah.
of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman back in 1994.
1994.
The trial that followed was just a complete media frenzy. And Simpson's acquittal is still debated today. But let's dive into these unheard voices.
Let's do it.
First up, we have Jill Shively.
Okay, so Shively's story is pretty interesting. She claims she almost hit O.J.'s white Bronco with her car.
Wow.
Near the crime scene on the night of the murders. And what makes her account even more interesting is she says she recognized O.J.'s voice from the Naked Gun movies that he was in.
Oh, wow.
And he seemed really upset.
So her account could have placed Simpson right near the murders when they happened.
Yeah.
Which would have been huge for the prosecution.
Yeah.
But because she sold her story to a tabloid, they decided not to use her testimony. They were worried it would make her seem less credible.
It's amazing to think about how that decision might have impacted the whole case.
Yeah.
You know, on top of that, there's Skip Junis, who says he saw Simpson at LAX that night.
At LAX.
Junis claims he saw Simpson carrying a cheap gym bag and actually getting rid of something long that was covered in cloth in a trash can.
Hold on, Simpson at the airport getting rid of something that sounds suspicious.
Right.
If that's true, that could be evidence tampering.
It could.
But Junis was never called to testify, even though he contacted both the prosecution and the defense.
And that's the real point of this part of the deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're left wondering what could have happened if these seemingly crucial pieces of information were presented to the jury. It makes you think, could they have gotten a more complete picture?
For sure.
It definitely raises more questions than answers.
Yeah, it does. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about Mike Gilbert.
Okay.
Simpson's agent for almost 20 years. I mean, that's a long time to know someone.
Yeah, to be that close to someone's life.
Right. Gilbert claims that after the acquittal, he asked Simpson what happened that night.
Yeah, and Simpson's alleged response is chilling.
What did he say?
Gilbert says Simpson told him if Nicole wouldn't have opened the door with a knife, she would still be alive.
Wow. That's not just a casual remark. It implies some kind of confrontation.
Great.
A struggle.
Yeah.
It suggests he's guilty, which is hard to ignore.
This alleged confession is so impactful because it comes from someone who knew Simpson well.
Right.
Gilbert was devastated. He said he couldn't believe
Yeah.
that the man he thought he knew would do something like that. And he ended up quitting as Simpson's agent.
Wow. Before we go any further, if you're finding this deep dive as captivating as we are,
Oh, yeah.
make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot more ground to cover.
A lot more.
So you won't want to miss it. Okay, let's talk about a perspective that's often overlooked in these cases.
Okay.
The victim's family.
Yeah, Ron Goldman's sister Kim shared a really sad detail about her brother's funeral.
Oh.
His injuries were so bad they had to cover up parts of his body during the service.
Oh my gosh.
Ooh.
It's a reminder of how brutal this crime really was.
Yeah.
The human cost that gets lost in all the legal stuff and the media frenzy.
Absolutely. It brings it home in a way that legal arguments just can't.
Yeah. And then there's Detective Tom Lange, the lead investigator on the case.
Yeah.
He noticed something strange about Simpson when he was told about Nicole's death.
Really? What was that?
Simpson didn't ask one question about the murder.
Wow.
Not about how it happened, not about suspects, nothing. Detective Lange found it very strange that he wasn't curious, especially since it was his ex-wife.
Right.
That's a huge contrast to how Nicole's family reacted.
Oh, yeah.
Her sister Denise was instantly sure that Simpson was guilty. There are even reports that she screamed,
Oh, wow.
that son of a blooch, he killed her.
Yeah, it's a raw reaction that speaks volumes.
It really does. It shows the difference between Simpson seeming detached
Right.
and the raw grief and suspicion from those close to Nicole.
Yeah. But the story changes again when we look at Ron Shipp, a former police officer and friend of Simpson who testified at the trial.
All right, bring on Shipp.
Okay.
What's his side of things?
So Shipp went to see Simpson right after the murders and saw something that seemed small at the time, but became a big deal later on a cut on Simpson's finger.
Why would that matter so much?
It's the inconsistencies in how Simpson explained it.
Really?
First, he said he cut it on a car seat. Then he said he cut it on a broken glass in Chicago.
Makes you wonder if he was avoiding telling the truth.
Right. Was he hiding evidence that might connect him to the murders?
Oh, wow.
And there's more coming to finish. Shipp says that Simpson had talked to him before about dreams of killing Nicole.
He talked about that?
According to Shipp, yes. And this is complicated because Nicole had also told Shipp that Simpson had physically abused her in the past.
Wow.
This history of domestic violence adds a really troubling side to their relationship.
Yeah.
And supports the idea that Simpson was capable of violence.
Okay, so we've got unheard witnesses, conflicting stories, and past violence.
Right.
It's a very different picture than what we're used to.
It is.
So where do we go from here?
Next, let's look at the evidence that was actually used in the trial and see how these details fit in. Let's talk about a piece of evidence that became super important during the trial. The gloves.
Okay.
A bloody glove was found at the crime scene, and they found a matching one at Simpson's house.
Okay.
The prosecution thought these gloves would be the absolute proof,
right,
the link between Simpson and the murders.
But then there was that moment in court when Simpson tried on the gloves, and they looked way too tight.
Yeah.
That's an image that everyone who followed this case remembers.
Totally. And the defense, led by Johnny Cochran, really emphasized this point with that famous line.
And what is it again?
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Oh, yeah. And that line, along with the image of those gloves not fitting, had a huge impact on how the public saw the case.
It did. It just shows how powerful an image or a phrase can be.
Yeah.
Especially in a huge case like this. It almost felt like that symbolism became more important than the actual evidence.
Exactly. And there's been so much debate about those gloves since the trial.
Oh, yeah.
Some experts say that leather gloves, especially when they're soaked in blood, can actually shrink a lot.
Right.
There's even been talk that Simpson might have been wearing latex gloves underneath.
It's possible.
Which would make the leather gloves impossible to fit.
That's right. So even the evidence that seemed simple wasn't so clear-cut. It reminds us that things aren't always what they seem.
Right, especially in a case that had so much media attention.
Exactly. Now let's talk about another really sensitive and complex part of the trial, the role of race.
Okay.
Simpson's defense team argued that the LAPD was racially biased.
Right.
And even suggested that Simpson was being framed.
And that idea really resonated with a lot of people.
It did.
Especially after the Rodney King beating and the LA riots.
It all happened just a few years before.
Yeah, the trial was happening in a city and a country that was already dealing with racial injustice and police brutality.
And the timing was really important. The Simpson trial wasn't just a murder trial. It became a symbol for all those bigger issues.
Yeah.
Issues of race inequality and the problems with the justice system.
And it revealed a huge divide in public opinion.
It did. Many Black Americans believed Simpson was innocent.
Yeah.
They saw him as a victim of a system that was against them.
Right. And many white Americans thought he was guilty.
Yeah.
And saw the defense's arguments about race as just a distraction.
It's a stark reminder of how connected race and justice are in America.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's still true today. The Simpson trial forced the country to deal with these issues head on.
Yeah.
And even though those conversations are hard, they're still so important.
It's sad, but it's interesting how one trial can represent such big problems in society.
It is. Now, even though Simpson was acquitted of the criminal charges, he was found responsible for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman in a civil trial. He had to pay millions of dollars to the victims' families.
So even though there was the not guilty verdict, there was still some sense of accountability.
Right, at least in the civil court.
But I can't imagine that any amount of money could truly help the families heal.
No, I don't think so. And even though he was acquitted, Simpson's reputation never recovered.
Right.
He went from being this loved athlete and celebrity to someone that people were suspicious of.
It really shows the downsides of fame.
It does. When you're in the public eye,
right,
your successes are bigger, but so are your failures.
In Simpson's case, the debt stuck with him, even after the trials were over.
Now, before we talk about the lasting effects of the trial and what we can learn from it if you're enjoying this deep dive, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
Absolutely. It helps us connect with more curious people like you.
That's right. And we have tons of other deep dives planned.
All right, so we've talked about the untold stories,
Yeah.
the evidence,
Yeah.
and the social context around the trial. What lasting impact did this trial have on our culture and the legal system? It feels like the OJ trial, it became more than just a trial. It was like this huge cultural thing.
You're totally right. The O.J. Simpson trial, it had this big impact.
Right.
Not just on the legal system, but on American culture as a whole.
Okay.
It changed how we think about celebrities, about race, even about how the media affects our lives.
Yeah, let's talk about the media first, because this trial, it was a 247 media circus. It was everywhere.
Oh, yeah. It was, you couldn't escape it, TV, newspapers, radio, everywhere. It was like the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle. Cable news was pretty new then.
Right.
And the Simpson trial, it just gave them endless content.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how the media influences what people think.
Yeah.
And whether all that coverage was really about finding the truth.
Right.
Or just about getting ratings.
Exactly. And then there's the whole celebrity thing.
Right. OJ wasn't just some football player.
Yeah.
He was this huge icon, a Hollywood star.
He was.
That level of fame, it definitely affected how people saw the case.
It did. It made people wonder if a jury could really be fair.
Right.
When the person on trial was someone they'd admired for so long.
Right. Someone they felt they knew.
Exactly. It blurred the lines between the real person and the image.
Yeah.
And it made the whole idea of justice seem even harder to grasp.
Yeah. And like we've been talking about, race was a big part of this trial.
It was. It showed the deep racial divides in the country and the lack of trust between the police and communities of color.
The Simpson trial, it made people start talking about these important issues.
It did issues of race and justice.
Yeah.
It made us face the reality of racism in the legal system and beyond.
It's tough.
And these conversations, even though they're hard, they're still so important today.
Right. It makes you realize that progress is slow.
Yeah.
And that these issues from the trial are still around.
They are. The legacy of the O.J. Simpson trial, it's complicated.
Yeah.
It reminds us of how powerful perception is, how complex the legal system is, and how race continues to have a huge impact on American society.
This is a case that still fascinates people.
Totally.
Frustrates people. It makes people think even all these years later.
It does.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
The untold stories, the evidence, the bigger picture.
Right.
But we want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
Knowing what we know now, does this change how you see the O.J. Simpson case?
That's a good question.
It's something to really consider, and we want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, tell us in the comments.
So if you enjoyed this deep dive into the O.J. Simpson trial, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
We'll have more thought-provoking content coming soon.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep exploring. Keep asking questions.
Keep diving deep.